Our story today takes us to the state of Alabama, which, like many states, is confronting the issue of how men and women compete with each other, for example, in sports. This, of course, has been an issue notably in this world of athletics, as people who are biologically male typically want to participate in sports for biological women. And the biological males have a tendency of dominating the competition because anyone who looks at sports stats for most sports will see that men tend to be very much better than women in most sports because of biological realities. But we don't like the biology because the biology is discriminatory. Perhaps it is, but that's the nature of nature. So, all the laws we want to pass doesn't have much effect on the nature. Well, Alabama has taken a look at this reality and said, we think that women's sports should be for women. And so their law that limits men competing as women now includes college students because, that is what we're trying to do. We want to have men's sports and women's sports. These are both good things. But if you let the men compete in the women's sports, there's basically no women's sports left because the men will dominate the competition, as we have seen in various results of various competitions. So let's take a look at what Alabama is doing in this domain. Let's get started with this. The Alabama governor has signed a bill into law that would make it illegal for public higher education institutions, colleges, universities, to allow transgender people to participate in sports that do not correspond with the gender they were given at birth. Public 2- and 4-year schools would prohibit biological males from participating on athletic teams or sports designed for females, and prohibit biological females from participating on athletic sports or teams designed for males. So this is something that obviously is an issue, and something Title IX was in some design, and something that Title IX was designed to create in the first place. When Title IX was created and said there should be equality in funding when it comes to men and women's sports, women's sports increased in colleges by about 900%, 9x, because of the amount of funding increase. It was a great thing because men's sports were getting all the money, women's sports weren't looking at, the money, and colleges making financial choices were saying, hey, we want to fund the male sports, not so much the women's sports. But Title IX said, no, that's not really fair to the women because they should also have the ability to participate in sports. And it's been a great thing because women's sports, in many cases, can be as good, if not better, than men's sports. In some respects, many women teams do fantastically, and they do a fantastic job, and it gives everyone an opportunity to participate. But this somewhat undercuts Title IX because it says there is no distinction between men and women, and men would be allowed to just participate in a women's team. And Alabama says, no, wait a second, we were right the first time. We should have separate teams for the separate sexes. Biological reality is a thing here. We were right when we created the separation. Let's not get rid of the separation. So this is a continuing fight, as we've seen through various news reports. The bill is, of course, in addition to legislation the governor had signed in 2021 that did this at the K through 12 level. So that is for all the students who are about ages 5 to age 18 for K through 12. And then, of course, colleges, typically for undergrad, are between 18 and 22 is, your starting ages, though, of course, some students start later than that. And of course, you go up from there as you consider graduate schools and other programs. But this is creating a unification in the way the schools are treated with respect to sports at all levels of public school. If you're a biological male, you're not going to be competing with women and girls sports in Alabama. It's about fairness, plain and simple, the Alabama governor said, which it seems to be correct. Because, the best women, tend not to do very well compared to the best men or even somewhat average men. Somewhat famously, the women's soccer team in the United States, which is the best in the world when it comes to women's soccer, winning the Women's World Cup on multiple occasions, has lost in scrimmage matches to under 14-year-old male teams. So that is how that works, right? The best women in the world at the sport of soccer, known as football to the rest of the world, the best women in the world at the sport have lost scrimmage matches to men who are under the age of 14, because biological reality is real. It's a harsh mistress, but it's real. It's just a thing that we have to accept because biology. Under the law, schools that uphold the ban would be shielded from any investigation or formal complaints relating to this. And those that report a violation could not be retaliated against government, it says. So we're going to try to say, look, we've determined this is a matter of state law. So if people want to report violations, then, we won't hold it against them, but we're also not going to investigate because we, as a matter of state policy, have determined there's nothing for us to investigate. We believe this is the way it should be. So sure, you can file your complaint. We'll guarantee that we won't retaliate against you, but we'll also guarantee we're not going to do anything about it because we believe that this is the correct course of action. So fine. Students who are deprived of athletic opportunity or suffer any direct or indirect harm as a result of any violation of the statute would also have a right to sue. So if schools choose to not obey this policy or try to get around the policy or something like that in some way, then the students themselves who are harmed by the schools not following the state mandate would be able to sue the people who are harming them in violation of the state mandate. The legislation points to actual biological realities that actually exist in the real world that any right-thinking person could observe, but we've tried to pretend for some reason don't exist. The legislation noting that physical differences between biological males and biological females have long made separate and sex-specific sport teams important so females can have equal opportunity to compete in sports. That was one of the principal ideas behind Title IX in the first place. We couldn't help noticing that all the men were participating in sports and not so much women. Hey, what if we said that you had to fund both the same and you couldn't discriminate on the basis of funding? Women participation in sports went up 900%, 9x as a result. And now, because of modern politics, we're trying to undo all that, which is bizarre because yes, men and women are different. That was the reason in the first place that we were only funding the men team before Title IX because men and women are different. And then we said, no, we have to fund them the same, which led to lots of good results for a lot of good people. But it was still based on biological realities. And now we want to undercut biological realities, so undo the Civil Rights Act. That's exciting. Last year, Alabama passed a law that would make it a crime for doctors or parents to approve gender-affirming medical care to minors. For example, hormone therapy and puberty blockers. That particular ban was blocked by a lower court last year, but of course that case is also working its way through appeal. So one of the things that various states are doing as well when it comes to this issue is blocking certain medical care when it relates to the under 18-year-olds. For example, puberty blockers, hormone therapies, and surgeries. Medical care is typically regulated at the state level in terms of what state procedures allow for or don't allow for in medicine. And some states have said, no, you can't have these kinds of procedures when it comes to the under 18-year-olds because it's too dangerous. And of course, a lot of people are suing in relation to that. And so far, this case has been blocked in the lower court level, but other states have done similar things to varying degrees of success in their respective states. It is obviously an issue percolating at a wide range of levels. The law in Alabama also bans transgender people from using bathrooms assigned to the gender that they identify with. So you have to use bathrooms associated with your gender, which also, of course, goes to the issue of locker rooms, for example, in sports facilities or gyms or other places where people are perhaps in a state of undress. And we want to make sure that there is people only there consistent with biological realities, because otherwise it might be a bit uncomfortable. So all those things are happening. Thus, that brings us to the end of the case for the moment of Alabama, who has passed a law that says that transgender students cannot compete other than in their biological sex at K through 12 or in college environments. So basically all of public education. Also, they can't use the bathrooms except associated with their gender. And also any students harmed by this competition that is invalid should be allowed to sue. So all those things are happening. Of course, this is not the only state doing things like this. Other states are doing this as well. And other states are going, of course, in the opposite direction, as ones do. And some states are banning the medical procedures. Other states are trying to make the medical procedures more available. There's a lot of confrontation in this domain. Now, most of these issues are a matter of state-specific law because the states have primary law authority under the Constitution, right? The federal government is one of specific powers. All reserve powers remain to the states or the people therein. So it might be the case that much of this is legal. States have the ability to make a choice. Some states want to go one direction, some states want to go completely the opposite direction, and that's probably legal. But of course, the Biden administration is also looking into this as a matter of Title IX and has been discussing the idea of using Title IX and other federal measures to force states to try to have the transgender medical care, surgeries, teams, and elsewhere. So, of course, this is going to go through lots and lots of legal levels and lots of court cases, all percolating through the system. Not clear how it'll turn out right now. But for the moment, that brings us to the end of discussion of this story.